8 Lessons from the Photo Ethics Podcast, a report produced for Global Ethics Day 2024. Each year since 2020, the Photography Ethics Center has interviewed 12 photographers asking them, what does photography ethics mean to you? After 4 years and 48 interviews, we have distilled 8 key lessons that we have learned about what it means to be an ethical photographer. These lessons, ranging from the language we use to the intentions we have, can help photographers, filmmakers, and visual storytellers to reflect on their process, develop their practice, and help to build a more equitable industry. Lesson 1. Visual storytelling is a collaboration. As Sarah Weiswa has said,
but at the end of the day, you have to work with someone in order to be able to tell a story.
Collaboration can take many different forms. We can work with participants to come up with an idea for a story or portrait together. In their work on queer communities, Salga Wismath explains that this kind of collaboration is important to mitigate participants' experience of body dysmorphia. We can give participants a say in how they're seen, or how much of them are seen. Rehab El-Dalil does this by inviting participants to intervene in the image through embroidery. We can incorporate participants' contributions. Justin Carey invites people to contribute in whatever way feels most appropriate for them, with some participants sharing songs, written reflections, or other personal contributions. We can integrate opportunities for feedback. Jason Houston holds listening sessions to share his photographs with community members and listen to their reflections. We can co-author images. Morwenna Kearsley passes her camera around so that many people are involved in making a set of images, and Anthony Livera facilitates assisted self-portraiture. As Justin Carey explains, collaboration is a kind of insurance policy against the reproduction of stereotypes.
I think one of the ways to work towards being ethical is to be inclusive and collaborative, because then I think you are automatically encouraging or inviting the views of other people if you are actively seeking to collaborate. You know, it's less likely to be just your idea, your view, your perspective.
By inviting the views of other people, photographers are less likely to reproduce their own assumptions about a community, place, or person in the resulting images. Lesson 2. A photographer's positionality shapes the stories they tell. None of us are objective. We all see the world through our own lens. Tara Pixley explains that it is important to understand what we as individuals bring to our media production.
In your career as a photographer, as a storyteller, as a journalist, you're going to tell, hundreds of stories. But the first story you have to tell to yourself is the one about you.
Practicing reflexivity is an important part of this process. This means asking questions like, what assumptions do I carry? What biases do I have? As Nilupa Yasmin says, you need to be conscious of your unconscious bias. This also means asking questions like, who am I in relation to the story I want to tell? Am I the right person to tell this story? From photographing in Rwanda, Crystal Ding explained that she learned that it's possible to do all your due diligence and yet maybe still be the wrong person to do the work. As Justin Carey says,
traditionally, documentary photography has been concerned with photographing disadvantaged, underprivileged, exploited communities around the world, often non-white communities, by white photographers.
Since the advent of photography, our visual landscape has been dominated by images made by white men. Since a photographer's positionality shapes the stories they tell, this means that visual stories have been predominantly told from a white male perspective. Tara Pixley explains that this perspective isn't wrong. However, it just isn't complete. It isn't diverse. It's not encompassing of the whole human experience, and it shows. For a more complete visual representation of our world, we need diversity at all levels of the image-making process. This includes photographers, photo editors, curators, contest jurors, and board members. When making decisions, for example, choosing a winning image or hiring a photographer, Justin Carey says that you need to look around the room. He says, if everyone in the room is the same as you, there's a big problem there. Lesson 3. The language we use matters. This includes both verbal language and visual language. Verbal language used to describe photography and photographic processes are often steeped in violence and colonialism. Words like shoot, capture, and aim parallel the language used to describe hunting. Ideas of the photographer as the hero who does justice to a subject and is a voice for the voiceless are increasingly challenged as paternalistic and othering. As Rehab El-Dalil says, it was a lot harder to call someone that I know very personally a subject. Photographic visual language has also been heavily influenced by colonialism, especially when it comes to the representation of the Global South, low and middle-income countries, and people of color. Pete Brook says,
photography and colonialism sort of like ran hand in hand. Their inventions came about at about the same time and have really suited one another.
To avoid replicating colonialist visual language, look at how a community has been represented historically and how it is most often represented today. What are the visual tropes that exist, and how can we challenge them through our photographs? As Tamara Abdul Hadi says,
there's a lot to unpack and a lot to think about in terms of these sort of repeating visual regimes that keep repeating themselves and we ingest them, but it's because we are used to seeing them. I think we need to open up and think about how certain places are being represented. And if we feel like we can add to that, then that's what we should do.
Lesson 4. Consent is a dialogue that takes time. Jess Crombie explains,
ultimately, it's about a conversation, a really, really in-depth, honest conversation, and about allowing yourself the time to have that conversation.
In order to give their consent, participants need to be informed about why they're being photographed, where the photographs will be seen, and any possible risks and ramifications of participating. Laura Bushnock explains that transparency is key.
But I think the key to any story that photographers work on is to be transparent with the people you're approaching. Just share with them your intentions, show them what you're working on, why you're doing it, where it's going to be published.
Approaching consent as a conversation creates space for participants to voice their concerns, ask questions, or state their preferences. As Smita Sharma explains, different people have different priorities, different reservations. This is not a conversation that takes place just once. Instead, it's an ongoing conversation with participants, which ideally continues throughout the process of project design, execution, and exhibition. Anthony Lavera explains that participants may change their mind and withdraw that consent. Daniel Reagan adds that one of the benefits of doing longer-term projects is that they give participants space to think and rethink about how they take part. Additionally, the work may change over time, and we may need to follow up with participants if there are any new or unplanned uses. As Crystal Ding says, over-communication has never done anyone any harm, but under-communication definitely does. Informed consent conversations can be supported by different tools. For example, we can use consent forms. Martha Tedesse designed her own consent form, written in a language that participants can understand. Danielle Villasana's consent form includes an addendum section where people can include information about their preferences for how their images are used. Tara Todros Whitehill's consent form has a section which makes clear the participant's option to retract consent. We can use project websites. Michelle Pearson Clark creates a website for each project she begins, so that prospective participants can find information about participating in the project online and in one place. Justin Carey created a website to publish one of his projects. He gave participants access to it before it went live so that they could see how their images were being used and flag any concerns. We can use a smartphone. When working in places where people have limited digital access, it can be difficult to gain informed consent to use a person's image online. Smita Sharma uses her smartphone to show people how their images will be accessed and seen online. Sharing examples of all of the ways that a person's image may be used, for example, screenshots of Instagram, photographs of billboards, or copies of a magazine, can illustrate the consent conversation and help to increase the participants' understanding about what they're consenting to. Lesson 5. Transparency is key for building trust. When a person agrees to be photographed, they're putting their trust in the photographer. Trust is important in the photographic process because being photographed can be an experience in vulnerability, especially if a person is sharing a very personal story. Therefore, one way to build trust with the people we photograph is by demonstrating vulnerability ourselves. As Malika Vora explains,
trust is established not when the picture is being taken. Sometimes it takes putting the camera down, looking someone in the eye and telling them something really personal. That's a part of being human. That's a part of letting someone know that, like, you're right there with them and you feel what they feel, and you too know what pain feels like, or you too know what it means to, like, be vulnerable.
For example, when Justin Carey was working on a project about loneliness, he felt uneasy when people revealed the struggles they were having, while he stayed silent about his own. He realized that he had to exhibit vulnerability himself if he was asking others to be vulnerable.
So I was actually just getting people to give me all their revelations without giving anything back. I wasn't being as open and honest myself with my own input into the work as I was hoping to elicit from other people, So that had to change. Before I sought to get other people to show me theirs, I had to show them mine.
We can build trust with our audience by being transparent about our relationships with the people we photograph and our intentions behind telling a certain story. For example, Malika Vora photographs feminist protests because she is also a feminist and supports the protesters. Malika is aware that she's telling the story of the protests from her own perspective. Rather than presenting her photographs as an objective representation, she believes it's important for her audience to understand her positionality in order to interpret her images. She explains, when you have to create this other layer of secrecy or obfuscation in the name of objectivity, then it's dishonest. Transparency with the audience is not always easy to achieve in editorial or documentary photography because many publications still hold on to the ideal of journalistic objectivity. Annie Tritt explains,
it's like if you're selling a product, I'm not pretending that I'm doing anything but selling something, and there's something really transparent about that. Whereas the transparency in editorial in photojournalism is so dicey.
Lesson 6. Photography is powerful. Brent Lewis explains this power, saying,
the one thing about photography is that it's universal. You might not speak the same language as someone. You might not understand whatever text is written. You might not actually, in some situations, be literate or able to read, but you can see an image. And that right there has the power to translate so much more.
Photographs are powerful tools for communication. Therefore, photographers hold a lot of power by determining how someone or something is represented through imagery. As Amanda Mustard explains,
we have a lot of power when we're holding a camera, especially in communities that we don't belong to. And we will all benefit by taking some time and just being a little bit more thoughtful about those power dynamics.
This representational power contributes to a power imbalance between the photographer and the people they photograph. Aware of this power imbalance, many photographers are developing strategies to work to mitigate it. Some work to share their representational power through collaboration. As Rehab El Dalil says,
there is a lot of liberation in letting go of your power position as someone with a camera, and giving space for people to express themselves and to have a say of how they would like to be photographed, or even to change your photographs afterward.
Others use their representational power to subvert expectations. As a commercial photographer, Walid Shah works to challenge stereotypes. For example, when photographing a sports car, he puts a woman in the driver's seat and a man in the passenger seat. As a documentary photographer, Malika Vora works to complicate the visual narrative. She explains, I want to kind of break past any assumptions that a person looking at the photograph might have about the person in the photograph. Lesson 7. Good intentions are important, but they're not always enough. As Kirsty Mackay says,
I think looking at the objective and your own reasons for documenting a subject is really, really important. What we see quite often is middle-class photographers making a story about working-class people, not really to raise awareness of an issue, but really for themselves, and for their own ego, and to elevate their status within photography.
Understanding your motivations for telling a certain story is an important kind of self-reflection. This means asking questions like, why do I want to make this photograph? What do I hope to achieve? Am I hoping to win an award? Am I hoping to affect change? Yet even the best of intentions can fall foul of ethics. As Arpita Shah says, good intentions are not good ethics. Without knowledge and understanding of the wider context, our photographs may inadvertently do more harm than good. Therefore, it's important to support good intentions with good knowledge. Taha Ahmad explains,
when a person knows about the roots of their work, they have a better understanding of the kind of work they are going to produce and what impact the work could make when it is out in front of the world.
Research can be an incredibly valuable way of developing our knowledge. This can include a wide range of activities, like reading about the subject, looking at photographs, exploring archives, and talking with people. It can also include building relationships with relevant organizations, activists, or academics who can collaborate or advise on the project. Reflecting on his practice, Jason Houston explains,
one thing that I've tried to do is define my value as being someone who's, a decent enough photographer, but more importantly, understands the subject matter and the issues in a way that allows me to really contribute to the conversation.
While some photographers describe how the camera has helped them to overcome shyness, to approach people, and to make connections with others, others point out that the camera can act as a barrier between the photographer and the person being photographed. For example, Fatih Abubakar explains that people may feel like they can't talk to you like they were talking to you before you picked up the camera. Therefore, it may be most productive to spend time developing knowledge of a place or community without a camera in hand.
I think that a lot of people go in with the camera first. And I think that for me is a problem. Sometimes you have to spend a lot of time without the camera to understand people, to understand societies.
Lesson 8. Photography ethics change. As Morwenna Kearsley says,
photography is a medium that is constantly kind of changing technologically. As it evolves, our ethics, our ideas of ethics, photographic ethics, change as well.
In addition to technological changes, there are social and political changes that shape how we think about ethics. Hannah Fletcher explains this, saying,
we're limited by our knowledge now. As our kind of society progresses and moves, we'll constantly have new knowledge and new understanding, and things will evolve and be better. And we really need to be able to move with that and constantly kind of keep evolving.
This may mean that past practice does not match up with the current ethical standards of today. This may also mean that current practice today may not be considered ethical in 10 or 20 years' time. Therefore, it's important not only to continue to learn about ethics, but to continue to be open to learning, as well as unlearning. As Anne Wakalor reflects,
I feel like the photography industry transforms so many times. One moment something is ethical, the next thing it's not. So that's why it's so important to always be updating yourself and researching and stuff. Because ethics is changing, you will make mistakes and there will be things you need to unlearn. And I think you need to position yourself in a way where you're open to unlearning.
the way that we respond to ethical decisions in the past is not necessarily the same way that we would choose to respond to them today. The key is to be able to reflect on our decisions and to use our experience to inform our practice going forward. This ability to engage in self-reflection is a cornerstone of photography ethics, which enables us to grow and evolve over time. This resource was developed through a thematic analysis of 48 episodes of the Photo Ethics podcast, seasons 1 through 4. This research was led by me, Dr. Savannah Dodd, founder and director of the Photography Ethics Center, during my practitioner's appointment within the Center for Creative Ethnography at Queen's University, Belfast in 2024. It was supported by the Photography Ethics Center's advisory team and by Luke Strong. It was funded by the Queen's University, Belfast Economic and Social Research Council Impact Acceleration Account. Thank you to all of the photographers who have contributed to this research by sharing their experiences through the Photo Ethics podcast. Special thanks to Anthony Lavera, Justin Carey, Rehab El-Dalil, and Malika Vora, who also contributed photographs to illustrate the PDF report. This report is available as a downloadable PDF in Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish on our website, where you can also find all of the podcast interviews that were referenced in this recording. Visit www.photoethics.org to learn more. That's www.photoethics.org.